Alright guys, so in this first video we're going to start with Hellboy, and you're going to see me starting with primitives here and quickly getting into the shape of the skull that we saw on the first video. And again, it's all about not so much what you start with, but how quickly you can get to a certain shape. And you see me, I've done enough skulls and faces and all that, so I start with different approaches. And I get this question very often, like how do I approach that? Make sure you watch my anatomy tutorials, and I do talk a little more in depth of how you can approach it in different ways. From here, you're going to see me doing the different characters differently, because I wanted to show you guys different ways to approach a face. And here, you would see that I don't have a lot of construction lines. Even the shapes that I'm putting in, they are in the wrong place. But then I'm easily then manipulating them and getting them to something that feels a little bit more correct. This is a stylized face, but I'm still trying to keep the basic construction forms of the face, where the eyes are and how the ears are. Of course the mouth is a little bit different, and the chin is the biggest thing on this character, but the construction is very much what we looked at on the other anatomy tutorials. When I'm making the skull, I'm extruding the jaw out of that, and then I'm starting to draw the face into that, and then I'm moving this the shapes around to get something that looks nice. And once I'm happy with the results, then I can start going deeper into the mesh and start adding the details. But I'm keeping it very loose. The resolution is quite low, but I'm getting that cheekbone in there now that I'm starting to have the proportions where I liked. The skull, if you see the back of the skull, it's not close to the shape that we want, but again, I'm not focusing on that at this point. I'm just trying to get as many information, keeping it low res, but I'm trying to get as many information as I can in there, so I can start visualizing the face, visualizing the design, so I can start making some more, some smarter decisions into the process here, so we can get something fast that looks nice. Again, if I were to then keep nailing or noodling the proportions until we have something that we like, we would just spend a lot of time, and we're just trying to get this fast. Here for the horns, it's the same thing that we did on the first video. I decided to mask the head, and then just push those polys around so we can get that clean circle. And you see how quick I get the ear in place. That's because I've done many ears, and I can't say it enough. Make sure you guys take a step back and study just the basics of anatomy. Sculpt the ear just by itself. I know this is a very complex character to if you're starting it, to just go ahead and do that. So make sure you just break it down. Do an eye, do an ear. Again, using the same tools. Make sure you have reference with you. Follow my tutorials if you wanted to, but make sure you get the basics in place before you jump into something like this. As you see for the body, same thing. Instead of just starting with another primitive, I duplicated the head, and I'm starting to manipulate the shape around and then dynamesh it in place. I'm getting the traps, and the forms are all over the place, but I'm getting the basic landmarks in place, so when I can start manipulating it and getting into proportions, and you just look nice, but all the pieces are in place. And again, this is a very good exercise once you start studying anatomy, to just get it things to look right. Here my meshes were too big, and you can kind of notice that by the size of your brush. If you get it to maximum size and your models are the size of the brush, you can easily come on the deformation settings and just scale everything down using the values instead of just kind of eyeballing it. That's what I did over there. Now I'm just extruding pieces around, trying to get the shape in there and the traps, and dynameshing into even lower res what I had before. Can't say this enough. Like, make sure you work with a very low res mesh at this face. We're just trying to get everything represented. This took me about an hour to just get the entire body. And what I'm gonna do here for the costume, or for his jacket, is what we kind of looked at very briefly on the first video, where I'm masking what I had before on the body. I'm masking what I want, and I'm coming in and extracting using that extract button. Same thing here. I'm just doing that for the collar, masking it, moving it in, trying to get that curvature that I want, and then using Dynamesh to kind of clean out that geometry a little bit more. And you see me using Z-Remesh as well for things like this, especially things that once we Dynamesh, it starts to get, you know, a lot of penetration and you got to start getting a lot of artifacts. I do use Z-Remesh a lot, and you see me doing that in the future here. But basically, the process here is masking, extracting, and then using Dynamesh to just keep manipulating the mesh until we have the shape that we like. Instead of coming in using primitives, trying to get, you know, extruding something from a plane. There's a lot of different ways that you could get, you know, to that color, for example. But here, like, the fastest way is just, at least for me, that I found out, you know, throughout the years, is that extracting that piece and then getting into shape, it'll get us to a nice place faster. And here, you also see me using a lot of masks. So, for example, like here on that sleeve, I'm masking it out. I'm inflating it, but I'm keeping it masked just so I can have some control over that shape. It's very easy to start getting messy with the things that we're doing. So I'm just trying to get, you know, very clean, and masking pieces out help with that. So I don't, you know, once I work with different meshes, I don't break what I already have. So you see me here. I'm doing the rest of that kind of flap on the jacket. And again, you saw me, I duplicated the collar since I had a similar shape, and now I'm kind of like manipulating it, you know, putting in place, manipulating the shape that I want. But again, trying to keeping it very, very loose and fast. And you see, you know, quickly realize why I move so fast on some of those things, is because I'm just being kind of smart with the pieces that I start with to just get me to the shape that I want closer, shape that I want faster. So you see me duplicating that collar, rotating it around, Dynameshing it, getting into place, and getting it ready for the next piece. Again, I'm not spending a lot of time on the pieces that I have. I will spend time later on. I will come back and start, you know, refining a little bit more, maybe Z-remeshing it so the shapes are cleaner. And you would realize that Z-remesh gives you a lot more control over the shape, over the polys to make it clean. I use it a lot more with hard surface where everything needs to be super clean and sharp. For things like fabrics and overall just kind of costuming, you don't need a lot of control over the topology, but it's just good to have, especially when you start doing folds, and we are going to talk more about folds in the next videos. So for here, I did create polygroups for the sleeve because you saw me lowering the arm. Once I lowered, I just made a polygroup so it's easy to select later on. Now I'm going back on the face, and you see me just jumping around back and forth just because I don't want to spend a lot of time on one piece. We'll make sure things are represented enough where I can get an overall view of the piece, and then later I can come back and refine it a little bit more. You know, one of the things that I found, and I kind of have to be a little more proactive about looking into when I'm working, is that to not spend a lot of time on something. Just a quick pause here. You see me Z-remeshing that sleeve just because, you know, it was getting a little bit messy under that armpit and to select things. So I quickly Z-remesh. Again, things are very loose right now that even if I Z-remesh, I'm not going to lose a lot of details. And Z-remesher is going to give me a clean topology so I can start from. Again, you saw me masking the body there and just extruding that lower part. Instead of appending a new primitive, I'm quickly just getting that in place. Like you see, it's very easy to then things are already in place for me to work on, to work from, and it's kind of saves me a lot of time doing that. To go back on that thought again, like I'm just have to be proactive about realizing if I'm spending a lot of time on a piece and I have to kind of force myself to stop and then move onto something else. You know, it's kind of very, you know, especially if you're sketching something and you're trying to be fast, try to get a fast result. You just have to be mindful of the time, honestly. Like you can't spend, like I said, it took me an hour to block out his entire body just because I was very proactive about moving around, you know, getting started on different pieces without spending a lot of time on just the one, the face or the body, you know, or the jacket. That by itself could take me a couple of days if I were to make it perfect. But again, that's not the point of this. We're just trying to get the entire character represented and then move on to something else. We're trying to do 5 characters in 2 days to that kind of result, to that quality. So we just have to be mindful of the time that we're spending on each piece. And not just that, but it just helps us with the overall design. Things need to be open enough where we can go back and change it if we're not happy. Like, we can't really spend a lot of time on this belt, because we're designing it on the fly. Like, we don't want to go back and kind of be, so attached to this belt where we just don't want to delete it. I want to be able to just do another one in a matter of minutes if I wanted to, if it's just not working. So same thing for here. I'm just gonna make that little accessory there, the belt buckle, and I just extrude it from the pants. Like, I'm not even worried about where it's coming from. Actually, this is a pocket, so easy to just start identifying where is it coming from, what's the easiest way to get to a certain place. I'm just rotating and masking that flap into position and getting it to behave correctly, and then later I can zero mesh, or I can just keep it as is. But again, just being smart about how we're working and where we're getting it from. Like, from this point on, we just pretty much use the same brushes that we looked at on the other video. I'm doing a lot of masking, rotating with masking, and extracting stuff all over the place. You saw me just do it again for the for the button there, and getting a very quick cylinder out of nothing, and just getting it in place. A lot of people ask me also about color, and you see me putting colors, anywhere I can, I will use colors, just because it is very important for me on the design, how the colors behave and how things are reading, and most, especially where I'm gonna spend most of my time, right? Like, the colors kind of dictate a little bit more of where the eye is going, a little bit better where I need to spend the time in making it look, more refined. Like, I don't have to spend, days into just this little pocket, this little bag, whatever this thing is, because it's not the focus. Like, it's not the where the attention needs to be. I will spend more time on the face. I will spend a little more time on the body, because that's what the focus of the image is, and the color helps so much with the design. Of course, when you are refining a character, making it for a game, for a production, you need to spend the time on the entire character. Like, the character needs to be refined. But again, even with that, you need to be mindful where you are putting your details. Like, you don't want to go too crazy everywhere, because you want to have rest areas. You want to make sure things read nicely, and the character overall feels cohesive. So I think the colors help a ton with that, and I try to quickly just put some poly paint or just fill the objects with just basic colors, because design wise is very helpful. And you see me here manipulating those little bags out of the same bag. Now I'm creating kind of the gun holster, just rotating things around, again keeping it very loose, dynameshing it around. When you're working with a lot of meshes like this into the same subtool, what you do want to do is just create polygroups, and when you on the dynamesh, you can turn on the group option. When you dynamesh it, it won't merge all the pieces together. That's a good way to just keep using dynamesh, but then have a bunch of objects on the same subtool. Just a quick little tip there. I don't think I was doing that for this, but it's just good to know. And here, for that folds, I am going to talk more about the fold parts with a different character, because it has a lot more folds. But for this, you can kind of see me using a lot more masking to control that shape a little bit better. I want to mask that main fold and then move things around so it creates a nice big fold there. We see at this point I'm just manipulating the shape the way we want it. Again, the exercises, for this type of stuff, honestly, to get faster, especially when you're doing full characters like this, is just anatomy. Like, you do want to exercise, do exercises on just an eye, What I'm doing here is a lot more complex with, you know, the costuming and all that stuff. But do, you know, take step by step. Start studying just, you know, sculpting, you know, basic primitives on the face, you know, sculpt the nose, sculpt the eyes, you know, make sure you get all that stuff working. So when you're doing something like this, you're not spending the time trying to study how to make an eye, right? Like this is more execution time and design. Once you have those you know, those basics nailed, then it just becomes a lot easier. The same thing for folds here. What I want to do is just have a lot of reference. Here I'm just sculpting with no reference because I've done this enough times where it's kind of my go-to, just make some folds, you know, on a jacket like this. But that's another good exercise of just kind of grabbing a reference of a jacket and just try to replicate. Try to make it one-to-one to what's happening. And then you start understanding a little bit more how folds work, you know, tension folds, just gravity overall, how, you know, how different fabrics behave, you know, on gravity and things like that. I'll show a little bit more with the different character. Here we're just starting to block out a little bit of the hair, and you see me using clay buildup for that a lot, especially when we start doing more sharp details like this. Clay buildup has a very sharp alpha, that square alpha, that when you start just dragging or painting basic brushes in there, you start getting a lot of nice information and a lot of sharp edges that kind of look like hair. So you see me sketching hair using clay buildup, and I do recommend you guys just play with it a little bit and see how it feels. You can do that same thing with just clay, and then coming in later with a standard brush with a very sharp just for the hairlines. But the clay buildup and then move to just pull the little hair silhouette out of it. It's just kind of a, you know, very good. I recommend you guys playing with that. And you see me using here and gives us a nice result. Hair in general, it's just such a big topic that I do want to cover it here a little bit, but I'm not going to go too deep into this. For sketching in 3D and then painting later in Photoshop, all that I'm doing is this kind of stuff, sculpting it with clay buildup, and then later on I'll paint the kind of the hair in Photoshop, but I'm trying to get the overall light information to come from 3D, and that helps me a lot when picking colors to paint those hairs. But I also use a lot of fiber mesh and ZBrush to just get me closer to the result, and also, you know, I'll use that as an extra pass when I'm painting in Photoshop. You know, of course, I've done a lot of different hairs in like games and cinematics and all that, and there's many different techniques. Of course, you know, it's impossible to cover it here, but you know, cards, hair with cards, hair using, you know, hair and fur, and different softwares. There's like many ways you guys can play with hair. For this case specifically, and if you're just sketching a character for a concept, all you need to know is just understand basics how the hair works, and then using clay tubes, clay buildup to paint that in and get a nice flow, because then later you can come back and just finish it out in Photoshop, which is what I'm doing here. So again, just adding a little bit of color just to get the design a little more defined. We have the face structure in there. Again, there's no details at all. The eyes are not even there, but I'm just trying to keep it very basic, almost like you know, a sketch and paper. And then later we're gonna come in and really refine this, refine the hair, you know, add all the wrinkles, refine all the forms and getting it to final. But this phase, you know, we're just trying to get the entire character represented here. We're gonna keep sketching this guy out in the next video. You're gonna pick it back up maybe in another character, or we're gonna pick it back up on this guy, and I'm gonna talk more about refining this, taking this to final, and what brushes, what tools do I use. So even here, I'm starting to add a little bit more of a secondary information and smoothing it out, just to get a little bit more of the nuance on the muscles, and try to get a little bit more info and see how the light behaves. I didn't mention before, but I'm using that basic material. Make sure you guys are using a material like that, which is it kind of behaves to lighting as expected. And we're gonna come back here and start refining this a little bit more on the next video.